Welcome to Creating Better Products, where we explore the real world stories from product leaders, not just their successes, but also their failures and their lessons learned. You will get practical tips that you can apply tomorrow. And today we will talk about the gap between physical products and digital products of the same brand. We will ask the question, is there a difference in how we approach the design of physical products like sneakers or a car and digital products like a website or an app? And how can we create that unified experience where we don't have that disconnect between physical and digital products? Because overall, they form the brand perception that customers will have. I have an amazing guest today, Francesco Fera. And Francesco, you're a creative product lead with a ton of experience in companies with a global presence and global reach, but also a broad spectrum all the way to startups and even failed startups. So I'm really curious to hear from that very background about that gap between physical and digital products that brands are creating and how we might bridge that gap. Francesco, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to have this conversation with you.
Can I nudge you to tell us a little bit about your background? What makes you so passionate about the topic of physical and digital experiences and that gap that we often see between the two?
So, I think if you see my career, if when I look and reflect on my career, I think up to 10, 15 years ago, I think I was just a regular designer, right? So I was doing my business, checking my job, doing my task, especially in the digital realm, and it was kind of okay, right? So I was fine. I was finding my way around. Then something changed in my life. I met for the first time like a company which was not purely digital. They were doing a physical product, and physical products are actually consumers love. Right, this brand is really well recognized, and back then, like pretty much all the world was going through what was so-called digital transformation, and I was part of this digital transformation. And then my reflection was starting looking why this brand is so cool in the physical product and why we are not getting even close to be recognized as a digital power in the design. Why we are not making it? And after that, I think my career and my actually focus even changed because the two the two things that were so departed for a long time, which I realized actually I need to find a way to bridge this gap and find a way to actually align the digital expectation, the digital ambitions to the something which was so established with the physical product, with the industrial design. And sometimes we see how we can actually mature those organizations. In reality, those organizations design-wise are mature. We are just not able to connect the two worlds. And ever since I made basically almost a mission for my career to find a way to connect the two worlds, if I can phrase it like that. Ambition probably is a bit of a statement, but yeah, I'm actually really looking to find these gaps, and I think it's pretty interesting for anyone in our domain. It's pretty interesting as a journey.
Yes, definitely. And that what makes brands successful is being able to bridge the gap between the two. You mentioned that when you got in contact with the physical side of products, in addition to your digital background, you started to look at that gap and what's causing that. So I'm really curious, what is causing the gap between the two?
I think like the gap is like a different I would say maturity in regard of the design itself, right? Because what is normally happening, what you observe it, organization in this space, right? Traditional organization, because if you look like a more tech organization like Apple, they don't have this problem. They're just one story. It's digital, physical, does not matter. It's one story. It's one brand, one mission, one vision. More traditional organization, which they went through this so-called digital transformation, however, they did not realize they're already having some solid foundation in this regard, But what happened is when they start to jump into digitalization, they just simply move people initially from traditional areas of the organization, whatever it could be, and slowly move them to be digital leaders. And this basically lack, or they lack, not because they want to, but it's like happening. They lack like this sensibility of figuring out the brand they work for is not like something they need to reinvent, is already there, but they just don't have the background or the education to get into it. And unfortunately, these come with some compromises, which in their perspective are acceptable, but for the consumer, not so much eventually. Because when you buy a product from one of those brands, you are expecting in their web store, the experience is exactly like touching, almost feeling the physical brand they have. So in reality, the gap exists, not because they want to, it's just happened. And I think like in our job we have like this special role sometimes to have, also it's also a privilege if you want to see like that, because not many people can do that. We have this privilege, we can actually cover this gap. And when that happened to me, and I was always wondering why this global brand I work for, they're missing so many basic things about their brand. Why they're making so decision? Why they force us to do these create black buttons or make things which were not really nice looking even? Why they do that? Because they were looking for short things, but for short like gains. But when you speak with like a industrial design, someone designing the product, you have a completely different perspective, and then you understand why those brands are so successful, the passion they have, the story they tell you about the product. It's like fascinating. And if you reflect about that, if you can translate this feeling, this message from physical to digital, I think you have a very strong direction to follow. I think you have like a very solid foundation when you want to express your digital design in the brand construction you want to build. And it's pretty interesting, very, very interesting.
Yeah, so it sounds there's things to learn from industrial designers for the digital space. What happens? Why does that not transfer naturally?
I think it's not that easy as such, right? It's not you have like a chat with an industrial designer. Well, let's imagine like you need to work for automotive, and it's not that easy to get why they make certain decision for the car, right? Imagine there is aerodynamic, there is a consumption, pollution. They take in consideration many things, right? However, when they do explain you the principle they follow, one of the designers I spoke with, like recently in for automotive, he was telling the story about the car he designed, and it was pretty fascinating. He was describing like the car more like an experience of sitting in a chair watching TV, and which is a completely something which you don't really relate while you drive. However, if you sit in the car, in the same car we were discussing, it does that feeling, right? So when I think about the experience I would like to provide on a website, I should actually recreate the same feeling, right? Which is not straightforward because in a website you are not sitting, you can obviously not watch TV, but what will like this website if this website was actually promoting that kind of experience? And then you have a different perspective, then you have a different direction in which color you need to use, in which animation you need to use, in which transition you need to use, and that basically help you a little bit to get you like the direction you get. But of course it's not happening because it's not that straightforward. You need to have like time to reflect on that, and if you get their perspective, it's like probably one of the best learning you can get in terms of design, because they do really have very deep thoughts about the product. And at the end of the day, if you work for one of those companies, what you are trying to do is you're trying to make successful the organization you work for by selling more of those products. So it does makes totally sense to have like these two things getting together if you think about that.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, how can we recreate that feeling from the physical space that you mentioned and bring that into the digital space? That seems a big challenge. And Are the
It
methods
is.
different that we should use? What can we steal? What do we need to change?
So I think first thing is if you like any of us is working for any of those organizations, what I would highly recommend is get in touch with the people designing the physical product. There is tons of rationales behind. You should be able to reapply in the digital space. So I think this is the first thing someone should do. Secondary is you do your design could be an experiential design, could be a UI, could be motion, could be whatever. If you think about, I was talking about the car, but could be a sneaker as well, right? When you feel the sneaker is giving you an emotion when you wear it and you look at it. The car does the same. Or when you touch a phone, if you think about Apple, when you open the phone, it's giving like an emotion. Well, I think if you pursue that message when you design your digital experience or digital language, I think you're nearly getting into the direction. And also, as you want to learn from them, right, from the industrial designer, show them what you're doing, explain them, be able to explain what you are trying to achieve, and probably them as a designer, but also as a human, give you like a direct feedback on actually if you are in the right path or not. Because of course, when you met someone who is going to probably use your product is giving you a feedback, right? And if the same person is trying to achieve the same emotion with his physical product, then it's definitely going to help you.
Hmm. So what's different is the medium, the physical and the digital, but what's in common is the emotion that we want to create. And the emotion we want our customers to feel with the physical product is the same that we want to recreate in the digital space. And then that would be that coherent experience across those different channels where customers feel that it's from one brand that has that same wow effect.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this, you couldn't have not express anything better because if you look, for example, Apple is seen as the company was mastering it, and it's actually they are mastering it. If you go from their website to their product, you don't expect anything that different. I'm not saying they have the best experience in the world. I'm not talking about that, but you get exactly what you expect, and this is fundamentally what a consumer which is pursuing and loving your brand is expecting. You need to be able to deliver that. Yes, of course, if you deliver a premium experience, an elevated experience, which is seamless, great, right? But if you're meeting the consumer expectation and you are following your mission as a brand, then you are achieving pretty much 99% of your job there. And this is what Apple is doing great. Then Apple product, right, like any physical product, is launching a product. A physical product is an event. It's something you do every 18 months if it's a shoe, every 7 years if it's a car, and probably is like 5 years if it's a phone. Maybe a little bit less, I don't know. When you launch a digital product, it's something which is not an event. You do it continuously. You can do billions of times per year. So it's not an event. The two things they don't get very long. Like I mean, if you look like also the automotive industry discussion, right? Those companies they've been working in a very like industrial way, like one step after another, then they go live, the car, they were reliable, stuff like that. Then the digital world came in, infotainment came in and changed everything, right? The consumer is not really buying anymore the car itself, but whatever the car represents. And these things is completely different, right? So these things, they go along, they need to live together. You need to live with the mechanical engineering, design, industrial design, way of thinking like a post-industrial revolution, but you still need to be able to be as fast as possible. The two things need to get along together, and this is probably the biggest difference they have, and companies are struggling to get. And I think us as designers sometimes we get trapped as well in the fact this is my business, this is my world, that's their world, but the two things they should not ever talk. In reality, it's not like that, unfortunately. At the eye of the consumers, definitely is not.
Yeah, what does it feel like for the consumer? Because we've heard your perspective as a designer, what it feels like, where maybe the vision and mission doesn't match, where industrial design and design doesn't work together in the way that you'd hope? What does it feel like for customers, and why should organizations really care about making that a coherent experience across both?
Well, I think is if you're trying to beat a brand or you're an established brand, the last thing you want is to screw your brand. This is the very last thing you want. And as brand, by the way, I'm not meaning like the usage of the logo or the font of the colors. Brand is way beyond that. I hope this is well known to everyone. So if you screw your reputation because the design you have in your website is not really matching by any mean the level of quality or expectation the consumer has of your physical product, you're simply destroying your brand, right? That's what is happening. That's a reality. Imagine trying to buy an Apple product on a website in the 90s right now. How you will feel? You will feel bad. You probably won't even buy it. Yeah, say, what is that? Well, sometimes we don't use web 90s design because luckily now the level is higher everywhere. But sometimes like this still happens, and it's happening because of a set of reasons, of a huge amount of reasons. Probably is not the right leadership in charge of the digital product. They are not feeling this is important for education, not because they really feel it, but also because probably us as a design lead, we are not firm enough to express basic things in the organization we work for. We just say, okay, I'm minding my business. Many of us, they do it a bit because it's perceived as a waste of time, a bit because it's if you feel like sometimes you're climbing a huge mountain you will never be able to finish. But I also reckon you should try, because if you don't try, you're missing like 90% of the story and the work you have to do for that organization.
Yes, and so the struggle around communicating value, I think, is very interesting. And when we talk about brand, it can sometimes feel this intangible thing. How does a company really get to understand the value that the brand brings? How do you communicate that? How do you make or help the organization feel the impact that that disconnected experience has on what they really want to achieve?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, because I was, while you were phrasing it, I was reflecting in certain cases, because I disagree. Many organization, even the lowest uh, person and far person in the brand, as a clear understanding, the brand he works for, it's basically what is paying his salary. Believe it or not, they do. What that means in practice, no. By far, they don't know. Yet they do understand their brand values as such. In fact, if you go in one of those meetings, even the most detached person for the brand discussion has always this point to make. Are we CI compliant? Are we blend compliant? Why? Because they know this is an important thing. And also there is this obscure entity, as you mentioned, probably abstract entity, which is the brand team, which is always double checking. The CI team is always double checking if what you do is actually done like that. So they do know this exists. It is a little bit more different to explain what you will like to do with the brand, because that's what we are discussing here. As a designer, what we are trying to achieve for the brand. Do we want to make the brand cooler? Do we want to support the brand? Or we just want to be as less as noise as possible for the brand? Because the three things, they're not going well together, and they are all different approaches, not necessarily helping the brand. None of them could be, but you are hoping, some people just work to not harm the brand, right? So when I was younger, I was just trying honestly to not screw with the brand. Yeah, I was like in my early career, and I was feeling like the brand people chasing me. This is not compliant, and then you don't know what to do. What the hell I have to do? You don't know. And right now, however, like you can be the guy shaping the brand, and if you are in the position of a leading a team of designers, you can even shape the brand, because the brand, if you're there, most likely the team needs your input to shape the brand in certain space. And in reality, you need to be able to express what you are doing for the company. right? So you need to be able. If you're not able to express the value you bring to the company, how you will help the brand to be successful? Because everyone knows the brand is paying their salary, especially if you work for a global brand, they know it. But
Yes.
what do you do for the brand is something that nobody can help you. You need to express it. And you should not use the brand as a shield when you don't know what to answer. Because sometimes I also observe that people say, no, it's a brand topic. It's not really, you know.
So, how do you express it? How do you personally communicate that value to, I don't know, executives, to your team? What makes you successful in helping people understand that?
This reminds me a story which maybe I told you some times ago. I was in this meeting with a bunch of executives, a very important CFO, very multi-billion euro business, and we were in this meeting with him, and he was literally asking me the same thing. So we were introducing ourselves, and it was my turn to say, I'm Francesco, I'm basically a designer. And the guy looked at me and say, okay, why you are here? So I was there and I didn't know what to answer. I was brain freezing, right? It took me like some time to reflect to give him an answer which was acceptable. After many years, I figured out maybe it was not even a good answer. So what I will answer now is probably Mia to make your brand more effective. And he will ask me what effective means for you. I will
Yes.
bring better KPIs for your financial KPI because that's what I was trying to achieve, right? Fundamentally, that's what I was trying to do. So when we express our value, right, we need to basically, if we go very deep in the root of what we want to do is, we need to be able to express what that means for the consumer who is interacting with our brand, why we're doing that, what is changing in the consumer interaction with the brand, and which value we bring to the organization. What is the value? Are we helping the company to make more money? Are we helping the company to save money? Because that's the only thing they're looking for. Objectively, why they should look for something else? That's how they're measured. And if you go there with a bit of philosophy, most likely you are not even listed. You are not even taking in consideration. And look, reflecting on myself a few years ago, I was saying that was really bad. Why I answered to him like that? I mean, I would not take myself serious. But these kind of experiences are coming for a reason and is a learning, right? But nobody's challenging if you can do your job good or not because most people cannot. Everyone is, however, expecting you bring some sort of value to the organization. And if this organization knows well what you bring at the table, they start listening to you. If they don't, that's a bit complicated to be taken consideration. So the discussion of even getting close to the organizational core business, the industrial is not even on the table because you are simply not credible yet.
Yeah. And how do you create that credibility?
I think it's a journey you need to take, and like being first being at the table with the the CFO means you did already. I did something good because otherwise I wouldn't be there, right? And I think whoever of us is in the same condition means you are doing something already good. This means is the job is not finished, of course. If being there doesn't mean you achieved it, you need to basically be able to do that. I think is you need to create your network of people who could support you. So when sometimes people call them politics, and but politics is used very, very often is in a negative way. I think politics is not necessarily a bad thing. You need politics for many things in any organization. Could be small, and even more if it's a big organization. People need to know what you do. People need to know who you are. And if you're able to basically connect with the right leaders, the right teams, which can support you on your mission to make awareness and make your job visible to the organization, that means you are in the right path. So you need politics. Unfortunately, you need to create this network. You can call it how you like it. It's like you need to be there. You need to be there not just for yourself, but also for your team. How you can help your team to be visible, to succeed, to mature, to get more credibility around the organization and not being just the pixel pushers for executing some product owner's vision, how you can do that. You need to make sure it's obvious your team is bringing something additional to the organization and ultimately to the company. You are a big asset for the company, but you need to make it visible. If you're not, and often in our case, as a designer, we are a little bit afraid to almost show our value. We need to change that. You need to start doing it. And if this sounds like politics, start doing politics because you need it. You need to create awareness, and awareness is bringing at the table, having you in the table, bringing and connecting dots around your organization. So start looking who can support you, get close to them, and start trading visibility because you have to.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to step back a little bit. So we're talking about creating credibility for design, being that boardroom conversation, keeping brand top of mind. And if we step back and think about that overall brand experience across the physical and digital, I just want to poke at that a little bit more. What prevents companies? What are the barriers that companies kind of put accidentally in place that prevent them from creating that coherent experience that is awesome for the physical products they're creating and then translating that into the digital space?
I think nothing prevents them as such. They just don't know. The reality is they don't know. I mean, in the experience I have, what happened was something a little bit bizarre. Something which in my opinion was a little bit bizarre. So imagine you start your digital transformation, right? So what you want to do is basically make sure those digital tools, including an e-commerce, are part of your organization. The worst thing could happen if you create an organization which is completely isolated of the rest of the company, right? So in my case, a couple of times that happened. And as a result is you had a brand for physical and then a brand for digital realms. And there was the two things that were not connected by any way. And things that get even worse because pretty much everyone, in lack of direction, they were just simply creating their own sub-brand. And you had like something which was, of course, reflecting. Imagine in certain websites, jumping from a product to another, the same website, you were feeling something was slightly different because probably the team didn't know which direction they had to take. But if you go even broader from the physical product or the store, the physical store to the digital store, things are completely different. And the reason is because pretty much all of them worked in isolation. It's not something which they want. It's something which is inherited from a post-industrial revolution setup where teams, they were working in isolation or in silos, if you want to call them like that, because it's very common to call them siloed organization. Because in the previous economy, that was working great. They didn't have to worry, right? They were shipping product. They were going through marketing campaign, and normally those marketing campaigns, they were delivering great brand awareness, and they were basically creating and raising those brands. They were working fine. Why changing? So when digitalization arrived, they simply said, okay, this is just another silo, and it was working okay. And unfortunately, none of them actually realized that bridging silos is way more complicated than spreading knowledge. Why? Because if you create an organization with like, I don't know, 3, 4,000, 5,000 people, imagine an organization with over 100,000 people. What do? You create an organization supporting the digital transformation, which is big enough in your eye as an executive who could support like the whole organization. And you start doing that. Then you realize for a reason or for another, what you do is completely detached from the organization, completely. This could happen for brands, but this could also start even for business results, right? Because you might check for some businesses which are, for example, top line, while the rest of the organization is looking for bottom line. And then you realize that that's basically a completely detached. So what you do, what naturally everyone would like to do is bridging the gap. But bridging the gap, it takes even longer and even more money than actually setting up the organization itself. So as a short answer is nobody really wants, it's just happening. Then there is a bit of, opportunism, because imagine if you are selected as a leader in one of these new organizations, your career is getting boosted. Why you are even trying to trade your career boost for something which is a lower profile? You will take the opportunity, and as an opportunist, and you take it because that's what you are there for, right? You are trying to increase also your career. So I think in general, executive, also consulting firm, when they suggest those digital, now I hope the things changed. When they suggest this digital transformation, they look more on more distributed digital knowledge around the current business model rather than siloed organization, because you adding another silo on many silos is not going to help you, obviously. But that's what happens very often, and that's basically also what, in my experience, prevented successful cohesive experiences, cohesive brand across traditional business core and new business, let's say, model coming in.
So this is what got us here, what leads to disconnected experiences. Now, the million-dollar question, of course, is how do we get ourselves out of this? How do established organizations bridge that gap now where they want to move forward and say, we understand brand is important. We want to have a coherent experience. How can we get there?
I think in general, my view is when it's possible is you have a design team for everything, right? So you have the common creative direction. There is no creative it cannot exist a creative direction for physical product, a creative direction for a physical store, a creative direction for a digital store. I think the creative direction should be one, and digital should be part of it. Very often is not. So I think the first thing I will do is bringing together digital, physical, everything together. Physical product and digital product, they should have a common language. Right now, it's not happening in many organizations. Well, I think it's the first way to do it. Same leadership. Strong leader, capable to do that. And you see organizations which are you cannot think of those organizations as leading design firms. They're actually leading in their industry. If you think about Pepsi a few years ago changed completely their way of approaching design. Completely. They have one strong leader, and around this leader, they create a massive team of designers which are operating across everything, and they all are part of the same organization. In fact, they are succeeding. They are over many other competitors for that. I believe this is actually something every organization of a decent size look at as an example of good practice, because they really bridged a lot the gap they had between the designer of a can of Coke to actually how they promote this Coke, and actually you experience this Coke in their website, how you see this Coke on the website. See, you don't think there is lots of work when you create a can of Coke, right? Design-wise, you detach it. However, there is a lot, and the perception of the brand is actually increased a lot, also because they made this bold step. One team taking care of the design end to end, wherever touch point we have with the consumer. And I think this is a great learning. I think that's how we bridge the gap. I think this is the fundamental change. And of course, you need to have leaders in all the discipline, regardless of where they are, in which field they're working, able to express the value they bring in. Because that's another thing. Without this leadership in place, you are obviously not able to make any step. And it's not about having good design, because you can have great designers, but not every good designer is there to help you to promote the value of the design they bring, because that's not what they do. And we need also to acknowledge that.
Yes, and you said something that really resonates with me, that is the end-to-end thinking. So let's not even talk about physical versus digital, but let's think about what is the end-to-end experience of a customer? What are the different touch points they have with that brand, whether it's physical, digital, and then even within our digital touch points that we have many different ways of how people can interact. How does that fit into their life? And how do these create a coherent story in the course of that interaction that customers have? And then that's what's creating value and that coherent experience.
Totally, totally. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you think about that, and I mean, I'm repeating some example of brand like Apple, but also think about Tesla. I mean, forget about the crazy guy who's in charge of Tesla and his political view or gestures. Uh, but what they did pretty well is giving a message as a brand, which is straightforward. We are electric, but we are cool and we are very simple to use. The first time I get into a Tesla, this many years ago, I was mesmerized by the fact that Tesla had no buttons. I was driving a German car with tons of buttons inside, which I loved the car itself. But when I went into the Tesla without driving, I said, okay, this car has no buttons. It's pretty fascinating. It was feeling like jumping from Nokia to the first iPhone. It's bold, right? It's bold. And if you go to their website, it's exactly what you expect to get. And it's so remarkable. And this is, again, nothing to do with the car itself, because I believe German cars are still cooler to drive and they are still cooler as a design. But if you look at it from a pure perspective of experience and design, the message between the car and the website and the app and the way you interact into the touch screen and the website is the same. It's a coherent story. Now, it's not by any means saying is the best, it's just coherent. It works. And that's why they were so disruptive when they jump into the markets. They had like a product which was okay by then, revolutionary, but now is okay, because if you think about that, a car from Tesla, it's like 9 years old design. And but when they jump in, these things was giving to you, okay, buying a car is extremely simple. That's exactly what you were expecting to get. And you get like an electric car, which is a new technology and so on. And this is, I think, something many organizations, especially in the automotive, are looking at.
You shared some really interesting examples around Tesla and Apple. I wonder about maybe a personal story where you managed to bridge the gap or narrow it and bring a more coherent experience to a product. Can you share a story and what enabled you to be successful? What helped you to bring things closer together?
So I think I was mentioning briefly before the automotive designer, but something really fascinating happened to me a few years ago. I think around 10 years ago, and I was at the gym. I'm not a gym rat by any means, no, but I was a period of my life I was going to the gym, and at the gym where I was working, I met this designer who created something pretty revolutionary back then. I think it's still pretty cool. Many organizations probably try to copy it, but not many did. But anyway, he created like a shoe which was 3D made. It was not the engineering part of it, but most the design part of it, right? And it was pretty fascinating listening the story. And obviously, he was basically talking about this shoe the day before it was launched. And so it was very vague, say, you will see tomorrow, you will see tomorrow. And I was so curious, what you do? What did you do? You will see tomorrow. It's going to be really, really new things and stuff like that. And then basically, I had the chance. I mean, if you're a bit of a sneakerhead, like touching the sneaker itself, it's like something giving you a feeling. And personally, the first things I do is basically when a brand new pair of shoes I touch in my hand, I need to touch the sole to feel it. And touching these shoes, because it was done very, very, very different, because I had the chance to touch it way before it was hitting the market. When I was touching it, I was having this very weird feeling. So I wanted to repeat this exactly the same feeling when clicking something or tapping something. But I don't know if it was successful, but it was, I think, the first time in my life I was actually building the same rationale on a digital design, on a digital motion, and was trying to communicate nearly the same thing. I don't know if it was successful, to be honest, because it was the first time, but I considered a success for me because it was a big learning on how I could repeat these things in a digital world where you can actually repeat that feeling. And that feeling for me was repeatable on some edge corners you were touching on the shoe, some like softness or hardness, if you want to say like that, of the sole, which was very not typical of a sneaker. And I think the overall idea of the design behind and repeating it in the shape, in the shadow, these 3D things it was creating, it was actually pretty good success for me as a learning experience. If commercially was a success, I could not say, to be honest, but for me it was definitely a big achievement and very fascinating experience.
Yeah, the story's interesting because I visualize you standing there with a sneaker in hand, drawing that inspiration from that. And it almost feels that any designer who wants to bring that same feeling from the physical product, you need to have that on your desk and be
I think
touching and experiencing it
it's not always
almost.
simple.
But it seems to be such
Yeah,
a strong aspect that made such an impression around you how the physical product
definitely.
feels. One needs to have that close at hand when we're designing the digital product so that we can
Absolutely.
bring that across.
But I would like also to stress again, everything was triggered by the fact that I was speaking with the designer of this sole, of this it's called midsole technically. He was explaining to me that, and that was triggering my mind. And in fact, in my desk, I didn't even have the shoe. I had like the physical midsole. I had the midsole in my desk and looking at this, and I start reflecting. I'm not very tired. My desk is a mess normally, and there was these things popping up here and there, and it was actually. I think it's cool, as you said, it's cool. You need to have it, and you need to touch it, experiencing it, and then you have like lots of inspiration out of it. And the story you heard from the designer who created it, it's so fascinating.
Yes. So if someone now wants to bridge that gap, we have a designer listening who wants to bring that physical experience to the digital space. What are your tips and recommendations for that person to do that?
So first, if you're in that condition and you're listening, you are a lucky guy because you're going to have like one of the most interesting experience of your career. Second, if you have, it doesn't matter if you are junior, mid, senior, or an executive in the design, reach out to your physical industrial design team and have a chat with them. Get closer to them as much as possible. Sometimes initially maybe they don't even take you in consideration because they have no clue what are you talking about. And probably yourself, you don't have any clue what they are talking about. But there is something which we have in common and you will have in common with them. You're working for the same brand, obviously, and you have passion for design. They do love what they do. And I think is the best first step to take. Get close to them. And understand the rationale on everything they do, take their point of view, and then start slowly bringing your point of view because they are also curious about your point of view, and get into this battlefield together because you are trying to achieve fundamentally the same thing. And I think this is the first thing you should do if you're listening. But enjoy the ride because it's the most important thing. The ride it's fascinating, it's amazing.
And what would be your tips to business leaders who say, I do get that brand is important. What are your tips to them to create that space so that that coherent experience can be created within that organization?
I think for the business leaders is do not hire designers because someone told you to do so, right? So someone because I think getting a designer is a huge value because with true design you can not only push your brand because you can build a coherent experience, but you can also, because a designer can do that, you can also prevent waste money. right? Imagine in digital, you can have like a designer creating prototype and helping you to basically go live with something is functional instead of something which is completely unfunctional. And I think if you, as a business leader, you get into this step, do and utilize the skills of a designer properly. And when you don't get what the designer is doing, is not a waste of money. Just ask. Just ask your design team to give you like their points of view and get exactly what they're heading to. Because sometimes it looks a little bit abstract what a designer does, but trust they are doing something which is matching also your goal. They are not there to waste your time, not your money. So if you hire them, hire cautiously. If you want to get into these things, they really bring additional value. It's not because we are saying it. It's not because it's like my opinion. There are McKinsey reports saying organization with a solid design culture, they are overpassing business-wise organization who they don't. So there is a business value. And it's a very interesting report, by the way. But you need to take also a bit of your time to understand what you don't understand. Because if you don't know, you cannot judge. And if you don't know, you're probably also choosing wrongly. And I saw many organizations with great, let's say, in ideas, but failing because the business lead was not taking or was not giving even the right input to the design team, and the design team was not chatting to the business lead. And one of the startups I was working for, it was probably failing because of that. I was not understanding what my CEO wanted completely. We had completely different understanding of what the company was going, which is bizarre because we were like 4 or 5 people. How this is possible? So it means if you have a designer in your team, you need to know what he can do for you, and you need to have the time to understand what design can do for you. And vice versa is also true. The vice versa, the designer need to understand you are not there because you are doing pretty things. You are also there to bring business value, and you need to be able to express this business value.
Yes. You shared some really interesting tips for people getting started as designers, for leaders creating that space. Maybe just as a summary, what were the key principles for yourself that helped you to be successful in that journey?
Persistence is the first. You really need to be persistent, because if you give up, it's gone. So you don't have to give up, right? So if you have like this in mind, just do it. Yeah, sometimes you're going to crash, sometimes you're going to get slapped, sometimes you're going to fail, but keep going because you are not doing something wrong. That's how it is. Build a network. Second is build a network, right? So if you are even in an organization of 5 people, or even imagine it's the first leading position you get, right? The first thing you need to do is start building who can support you. You can be a leader if someone is listening to you, your team, but also people around you. That's easy. Like people, your team will follow you because maybe they are forced to, but people around you, they don't have to. So you need to be able to persuade those people. So just create the network. There are different ways to do that. Everyone has his own, and everything is fine. Just do it. Probably the final one is be able really to concisely express what is the value you bring at the table. Because when I was making the example of CFO, I wasn't ready, and it was an issue. All right. For me, later became an issue. I was reflecting for many times. Get ready to express concisely why you are there, because you need to do it. And when you are able to do this is coming alongside with also another thing, which is probably another, let's say, step you need to take, which is start doing politics. Do politics. You have to do it. If you don't do it, you are missing like the things. Yeah, like 90% of the things. Unfortunately, without politics, you don't create visibility to your proximal team. You don't create visibility on what you do. And it's not something you have to do through your networking. You have to do through politics. You need to be there when decisions are made. Your name needs to be there when decisions are made. And this is not networking. Networking is helping you to create a bunch of people around you, which are going to be easy to talk to, get feedback, get what's going on in the organization, but it's not politics. Do not mix the two things.
Interesting. Wrapping up with a final question. This podcast is called Creating Better Products. Why is it so important to bridge the gap between physical and digital products to create that overall better product experience?
Bring a cohesive experience for the brand, which is in line with the mission of the brand, end to end. That's what we want to do.
Wonderful.
One sentence.
I love it when it's succinct. That's all we need, because then we can remember it and keep it top of mind. Are there a few books, resources, podcasts that you can recommend to our listeners that inspired you personally?
I think I'm more a book guy. Of course, your podcast, listen to Sabrina podcast because it's really good. But I'm more a book guy because I spend lots of time traveling, so I have more time for reading. And I have quite few of them. I think is for designers, the design of everyday things from Don Norman is something everyone should read. But also, which is related to my experience that helped me a lot, is another book is Change by Design by Tim Brown. Another book which I really enjoyed last year is Design Brand Identity by Elena Wheeler. And this is something which is controversial, but I found it pretty interesting. I think everyone should have an opinion about that. There is a book called Hooked by Nira Hayal. It is basically, it's a bit dodgy in certain ways because it's using lots of bias from consumer, but it's a very interesting thing. And finally, whoever would like to get at the beginning of the career, I think the first book I wrote, and I keep suggesting to everyone who wants to get into the field, I think is an easy read and a good way to approach things, which is Don't Let Me Think from Steve Krug. It's a book everyone read at the beginning of the career, and I think is a good book to read to start with your career, because it's giving like some very simple perspective on how you should approach your problem solving thinking, I would say.
Wow. 5 books even from you. Thank you so much, Francesco.
I have also others, but I think this one are the 5 who came in my mind.
I love them. Actually, I've read all of them, so thank you for sharing them. Now, where can people find you in case they want to chat to you a little bit more about this topic?
On LinkedIn as Francesco F. Or Ferology if you put the address. Or I have a blog where it's a bit lacking behind because I don't have so much time lately to write, and it's on Medium, Mr. F3R4, MR F3R4. And I think that's it. That's what everything I have. If you're around Munich, I'm in Ostbahnhof, my office. You can ping me. We can even meet in person for a coffee.
Wonderful. Francesco, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I think this is a really, really important topic, creating that coherent experience from the physical to the digital world. There are still many organizations who are on that journey of doing that. So thank you so much for sharing your experience today.
Thank you, Sabrina, for having me and the nice chat we had.
And now a question to our listeners. What is your experience in bridging the gap between physical and digital experiences? How are you able to create a holistic customer experience across both? What were your successes and what were your setbacks? I would love to hear from you. Please share your experience in the comments or reach out to me directly. And finally, if you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, please share it with your network and give us a like and subscribe in your favorite streaming platform. By doing this, you help to elevate the voice of our amazing guests. And today, this was Francesco. Thank you and see you next time. I think the thing that I took away that really brings together physical and digital design is the feeling that we want to create in people. I think that's very powerful because if I think about like, oh, I designed something physical, now to do something digital, how does that get together? That these are different mediums, but it's the feeling that connects them. And if that is the same thing that we can trigger, that's the powerful thing that we're
Yeah.
actually after.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Tesla, they got it. They are not traditional organization, they're pretty new, but they got it.
What do they do differently? Why do they manage to do it?
They have one team for design, one.
Just one team.
Also Pepsi. Mauro Porcini, I think he's called, the chief
Oh yeah, he wrote the
designer.
book. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly him. If you read about the book, it's really nailing it. He has like lots of experiences, was leading things, but in Pepsi changed a bit the benchmark of his industry, and it's pretty fascinating.
It's so interesting that we were talking about design, physical and digital products, but actually what's hard is how do you need to set up, how do you need to design the organization
Yeah,
so that you can deliver
yeah,
the awesome design? And this is the biggest stumbling block.